welcome to Final.Final with Geoff Tice, a podcast about creativity, art, design, comedy. Another podcast that as soon as we have Rick Rubin on as a guest, we are stopping the podcast. It's over. We're going to shut it down as soon as he's on. But today we have an even better guest. I'm so excited. He's a wonderful friend, an incredible artist and creative person. You might have seen him on the Sci-Fi Channel. He's a creator, writer, and actor of the amazing Intercepts podcast. He also has another podcast called These Are Those Tapes. David Huntsberger, welcome. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming, dude.
Thanks, dude. I like the it's good to see you, first of all, but I like the stated goal. Gives a narrative arc to this show where there's a conflict that can be resolved, a plot almost. And it reminds me, I don't know if you've heard of the Dead Eyes podcast, but the short version of that, and I've never listened to it, but I just like the story that this guy, and I don't think I have all the details right, but he was close to being cast. Like, I feel maybe at a studio network test to be, and I think it was Band of Brothers. And then he was removed, and he got wind. He heard this rumor that it was Tom Hanks didn't like him because he thought he had dead eyes. So then he started this podcast called the Dead Eyes podcast, and he would just talk with anyone along the way about, what's it like to pursue this route, particularly acting, with the stated goal of maybe I can ask Tom Hanks. And then he got Tom Hanks. And I don't know if
he did.
Oh, he did. Yeah, he did. Did interview Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks, of course, was like, that's such a ridiculous thing. I can't imagine.
That's so funny.
Happened. Yeah. So yeah. I hope you get Rick Rubin, dude. And then I'm so curious, why he's your guy above all else, above all others. So
it's more of a joke because it's more of of the time, depending on how long this goes. He might not be in the zeitgeist of creativity as much as he is, but right now he released the book, and everyone in my sphere of creative people that I know are like, have you read his book? Have you read his book? And I'm like, I will eventually. I'm halfway through it. And it's just kind of he's the oracle at this very moment. And so, and the idea of the podcast is, and I'll ask you this first question in a second, but the idea is do you know when what you're doing is done? And I wanted this podcast to be I have a definitive, it's done when I just get this one guy on there to talk for 30 minutes, and then we can move on. It can live as what it is, and then it's over. But so that's where Final.Final, the name, comes from. When you're, anyone who's done any sort of writing a script or versioning of any sort of design, when you're cool, final, I'm sending it out to the client, and then they have feedback, and you're like, all right, .final, one more version of the final. So
I do numbers, but I do all caps, final, all caps, _01, and I just start there. I never do a final without a 01 after it.
That's so funny that though that you're going to be versioning your final already, which is great.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that some of the things you mentioned, like comics, those were easy to be done with. When I first started, they were done when I sketched them in pencil, and I said, that's enough.
Yeah.
And then I thought, they're not scanning so great, and I added pens to the mix. And then I got to learn about all these different, I really liked Prismacolors. I know everyone, I've used the other ones too that everyone uses for 0.001 all the way up to a bold chisel.
Yeah.
I'm looking at one right now, and I can't remember the brand name, so apologies to the company that makes these little beige or tan pins. They're so good. But
Micron.
Yes, Micron pens.
Yeah.
But between them and Prismacolor, I really liked. And so then it was a new learning thing, and learning how to I didn't know anything about line weight at all, so I was just inking everything in the same, maybe a 7, a pretty big point, and not getting the finer details of the inside of an eye or something, in a comic, and being so mad and having to go in Photoshop and erase so the white was there so that there is an actual eyeball, and then even that, there is all right, I've erased the pixels I want to erase. It was very clear, black line art on white, the end. Sometimes there'd be maybe some shading or something, but I kept things real minimal, and that was really helpful because those had a very clear end point, And then I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of stand up at the time, and like I don't know that things with stand up really they're done when you like record them, and then some
Right.
people will continue doing them after they record, and then that's the worst thing because inevitably, like
Yeah.
invariably, they go, "Ah, I just stumbled on this new thing, makes it way better."
The
Guys,
greatest tag
two
of
more
all
minutes.
time.
Yeah, the greatest tag you could. Why?
Yeah.
I always think like, why'd you keep doing it? Like, once you
So
record it,
you don't. You stop doing it. Because you have how many albums? I think like 4 or 5.
yeah, and I would absolutely stop the moment if
Yeah.
someone booked me for a huge gig, let's just say hypothetically, and I had just recorded something, and it meant, oh, I gotta do that big gig tomorrow night. I would just be like, well, I hope they like 30 minutes of real rough, terrible
I love
material because
that.
I can't do these other ones because they're done. They're final, the end.
Final, no doubt final. I love that so much because I I want to be like that, and I think I'm like that, and then I recorded and I'm still doing jokes that I recorded, and every time I start one of those jokes, I have new stuff, but every time I start one of those new jokes, I as I'm saying it, I'm like, you fraud. I hate this so much. Like this, like I did, like the joke's doing well because I've done it for way too long. And I'm just like, man, you suck. You're garbage.
Oh, don't no, be nice to yourself because you're there's like so much more confidence in doing it because you're saying it is dot final. It's done. I can do this over and over. Whereas I'm
Yeah.
thinking, if I keep doing this, I'm probably going to stumble on something I like, and then it'll just grind me that I can't
Yeah.
re-record it and do it differently.
Well, that's definitely happened. I get upset that I'm doing it, and then I get double upset that I'm finding new. It's getting better.
You're getting both parts of it.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, that sucks too.
I think
Do
about
you
the. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just gonna ask the next question. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, this ties into that. So a little bow on the end of that thing, as far as stand up goes, is when I think of joke writing that is the end dot final. You think of like Stephen Wright or Mitch Hedberg, kind of one liner,
Mhm.
very succinct. And yet there's a Mitch Hedberg joke where he's like, if you, and he talks about like being in front of a fire exit and someone's like, you're blocking a fire exit. And the punchline is, if you have legs and are flammable, you are never blocking a fire exit. Records it. And then someone hears that album and goes, hey, what about a table? So then he had to like do this like addendum, which to me is just, it doesn't happen in a Mitch Hedberg world. He's so thoughtful and covered every angle of it that I'll bet there was a part of him who was like, damn, I missed one and someone else caught it. And so then he would add
Yeah,
that later. And so then sometimes someone else might add the final dot final to you where you're like, no, that's done.
to
And you
it.
go,
Yeah,
what about this? Oh,
yeah. And I wonder, do you know who it came from? Did it come from another comedian, or did it come from like an audience member?
in my mind, it was from an audience member, but I can't say with any real
Yeah,
certainty on that one.
yeah, yeah. That's also fascinating too. I'm a big fan of Mike Birbiglia, and he always talks about like, I'll take tags from anywhere if it makes it better. Which it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, why
make
not?
it open source. Yeah, everyone
It's
contributing,
great.
adding a little line of code, end up with something good.
Yeah. What came first for you, writing like jokes and comedy, or drawing and comics and putting jokes in visual form,
Huh.
or were they in tandem?
Yeah, I think I always did both. I think looking back, like one time we found this journal. My third grade teacher would have us write a little bit every morning. And I think this has been going on for a while, but I did a little drawing and then we had to write, I like the month of February or something like that. And I wrote, I like the month of February because my jokes work better. So I'd already been like working on jokes, trying to make my buddies laugh. And she wrote at the bottom, it's working or something like that, which I thought was very nice. But I think I can look back and relatives would have, I'm sure you have this like pictures on the wall that it drew. Like you never really, it seems pretentious when you're 7 or 8, right? Geoff, age 7. But sometimes an adult will write that, and then you think of like, and you have a child, you're going to go through this mass turnover of creativity. Where you're like, oh, you brought this home from school, immediately in the trash, and then you
Yep.
just hope
Yep.
that one day
Oh,
you're not going
dude.
to look. It's endless,
Yeah.
and so that some of those things
She's.
survive me.
Yeah. I've already had those issues, those like crisis of my parents kept so much of my art, and then I'm like, or did they? I wonder how much art
Yeah,
I made that I don't remember that shit. They're like, absolutely not. Like, are you kidding me? This is construction paper barely taped to another piece of construction paper. Like,
Yeah.
and my daughter's like, it's a train. And I'm like, it is. That is docking in the station of the trash can as soon as you turn away.
That is
It's
helpful
like,
though too, that like to learn that, to learn what is not great, to learn what to like move on from. And I don't think you can ever teach that to someone. That is just a hard lesson that, you know, you do a joke enough times and the crowd's just not into it. You have to make that decision like this, every crowd is a bunch of idiots and I'm going to stick with this, or
yeah.
I need to make some
Yeah.
real.
We've all had those jokes where they're not working and then you're stubborn and you're like, I'm going to make this work. And then it never comes together. And you're just like, man, every time I tell this joke, it bombs. And then I know it's going to bomb. And then I don't fix it. And it's not getting better.
I will tell a success story of one of those type of jokes though, where one time in Austin, open mic, the crowd was on fire, and particularly this one woman. And but looking back, like I remember standing off to the side, like I don't know if this lady's is like my target. She just seems like I don't know. There's something there about like wine is a food group kind of a style about her, and but she was very supportive to all the comedians, and so it felt like this is a layup. And I thought I'm gonna do my joke about being the god of ants, and it was just crickets throughout, except these two dudes who were dressed like Far Side character botanists. I mean, they might as well have been holding butterfly nets or something, and they laughed. And I thought, well, that's interesting. They didn't really laugh at much the whole night, and maybe for them this was a nice little reprieve from wine as a food group. And so then I would do that joke sporadically every 6 months. I'm like, I'm gonna do that joke, even though it never works. It didn't even get the lady in the open mic. And then I was recording an album and I put it on there. And you can't see this as much now, but when they were like, what were they like? Sirius had this thing, this app that this dashboard, and you could see like what was trending and track all of your metrics for your jokes. That one was like shockingly always doing well. So I
That's
stuck
so
to my
great.
guns, and then it ended up being something that found its home throughout people's ears wherever they go. And
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to stick with that.
Yeah. And you realize, yeah, maybe in a live setting, it doesn't hit as hard, but people in their car, they're like, I love this so much. This is the joke that I love. Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah,
I love that.
thanks, man. Yeah, if comedians are listening and thinking like, I just, maybe especially when you're young, you're trying to make that decision. How many of my jokes do I stick with that don't do well? I don't even know if you're afforded
Yeah.
that luxury anymore. Like you kind of always have to be doing well to get stage time these days.
It's
So tough, but
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. What are you doing now that it gets you excited creatively? Like, I know you're writing a ton of the Intercepts podcast is so awesome. It's such a cool project that you've been doing. But
thanks, man.
what are you doing every day that you're like, oh, I'm excited to do this? Is it stand up, or is it writing? Is it yeah.
Yeah. So the finality of being done with jokes, being done with comics during the pandemic, right before the lockdown, I had filmed an hour of material, and I could have easily just edited that together, but I really wanted to include all these animators and kind of make it more of a visual thing. And the person that was helping me edit was very excited to do it, but we were starting to meet less and less frequently, and I felt really bad about bugging him. I'm like, I bet this dude's just sitting there wondering how he's gonna like stay alive, and then hey, you want to come over and look through some footage? So I kind of stopped bugging him. I'll leave that in his court. And I started just like watching tutorials and learning kind of like Adobe Premiere and After Effects and some of the editing stuff, and then getting all the learning of like codecs and frame rates and how to use proxies and how to rotoscope. And then to run that, the hardware that you need for like different processors and graphics cards. And it's
Yeah.
sort of endless. And I was getting to a point where I was months and months and months into like going frame by frame and almost like pixel by pixel into.
Whoa.
Someone had to say, I learned this in art school. You have to at some point know pencils down. And that became a phrase that was really valuable to me, where I would just go, all right, pencils down. It's not perfect.
Yep.
It's probably never going to be done, but pencils down. And
Yep.
but I loved the learning. I found that like creatively,
Yeah.
when would talk about early on humans playing checkers. They thought that was infinite. And the idea that a computer could beat you baffled people. They're like, at
Yeah.
checkers. And then we look at that now like, yeah. And then chess, same way. Oh, there's unlimited routes. Well, now they're finding like, no, Go is the only one that maybe had some options where a human could outthink a computer. And then I think even that, the greatest Go masters started losing consecutively or consistently to computers. And it's kind of like that with stand up. Every crowd's different. Everything you're learning is a little different. I like the learning part of it. But I
Yeah.
found like when I was, I don't know, writing all these sketches, it just started from kind of having a bad uh, experience with signing a deal and thinking like, what if I just made an album and I owned every part of it? So then I was just going to write a
Yeah.
few quick sketches, get some friends and record them and do that just to have something out that I 100% owned. And as I started writing it, it felt like for years, like with stand up, people would be like, oh, it looks like you put a lot of time into that joke. And I'd be like, I think I'm just too lazy to try to be an actual writer. I like that you can you can like use physical gestures and you can like if whatever you need to sell a joke, you can do that on stage. And that is helpful when you're like, I think if this was just on paper, it is not great. And that's not the greatest level of confidence to have, but it's such a ballsy thing to just be like mail off a manuscript and like, it's good. I think you'll like it.
Fine.
That's
Yeah.
it. That, to me, that just doesn't really resonate with a comedian all that much, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it's good.
We all know that comedian that they're just it's all vibes. You're like, is this it? This is it, huh? And you're just like, there's no words, there's no writing at all. And it's just like, all right.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Then that can work. And sometimes that can be comforting. Like this person is just kind of a fun energy to witness. But if you're a comedian and you really enjoy the writing process, you're just seething off to the side, like, how is this working? What is humanity? Is this all we're reduced to this?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
so
they're doing just arenas and theaters, and you're just like, what? How? What is happening? I mean, it is the true nature of the entertainment industry, because it is entertainment. It's not the
yeah.
writing industry. It's
I had such a hard time when we started podcasting and we would sell quite a few tickets to live shows and we'd be backstage like we have no idea what we're going to say, what we're going to talk about, and you could hear
yeah,
people like this buzz behind the curtain, people so excited. And I'd just be like,
yeah.
I put so much time into writing the words and memorizing them and getting on stage, and
Mhm.
then you never get that same energy. And if I think if you live with that in entertainment, this feeling that it's got to be just, you'll go insane. You just have to understand it's
Yeah,
all kind of smoke and mirrors, and it's snake oil
yeah,
salesy, and people like a show, they like entertainment, they like all the stuff,
yeah.
the escapism, and
I mean, I have that feeling even before this. I've only recorded a handful of episodes so far, and I haven't put any out yet. So there's not even pressure to like hit a deadline. I'm just talking with my friends at this point, and I still have it in my head. Where's the set list? Like, why? What am I even gonna talk about? I'm like, what if David's mute? Like, what do we do? Like, what do we? You know what I mean? Like, it's like
yeah,
these are the dumbest things, because yeah, everything stand up wise, like I'm very word for word in my writing and my stand up, and to the detriment sometimes of the material, and sometimes it feels robotic when I haven't done it enough. Like new jokes for me sound, I'm like, oh yeah, he's reading the notes app that he wrote that he's now memorized. Like I need to like, massage my way out of that. But when it gets to stuff like this in podcasts, I love them, but I do have that anxiety right before we hit record. I'm like, well, who knows?
yeah. I think that the new venture I'm on, to sort of answer your question, like the Intercepts thing is really kind of all I have time for currently because it takes a ton of time.
Yeah.
At first I was editing the sketches and I had two mics set up and I would just riff both parts and I would just do a character for one and kind of a normal voice. And then with some
Yeah.
quick cuts, you can you can stagger the layers so that it sounds like, well, that voice is talking on top of the other one. They must be two people. And that was very easy to chop together. Just riff something for a few minutes,
Yeah.
make some cuts, stagger them together. And then when I really started committing to writing, which so many people are like, I want to write my screenplay, or I want to write this. And most people we know don't do it. And then you go
I
on any
mean,
streaming site and see, oh, everyone's doing it nonstop. Like these people, this is just one of probably 10 screenplays they wrote. It's not good. And this was their best one, and they got it made. This made their whole
that's
life. Their
it.
parents went, you got a movie made. And we all watched it and were like, that was garbage. But they did it. They did the thing. And like there's a huge pressure that comes off from doing that. We're just living in this golden age of abundance and excess, and like try it, give it a
Yeah.
shot. And so writing and actually seeing the cursor and just giving names to characters and writing the dialogue made it a little harder, because then suddenly I'm like, I'm not just riffing both things. I'm messaging you. I'm like, hey, do you want to play this part? And then recording, and then it becomes a little more like I'm learning how to listen for what I want out of the other people, and then I'm learning how to change maybe some of the words if I need to, and then I'm learning all the
Yeah.
software to get the highest quality possible from it. And I think it comes back to, it's nice to just riff. It's nice to go out on stage and have a bunch of people excited, and you just shoot the breeze, and you have. I love that. I thought that was so fun. But I
Yeah.
also really like creativity, and I like trying to keep myself creative. So this sort of forces me to, like, when I hear those little things, those things that wander in, and then you're like, just start engaging with them a little bit. I'm like, what does this mean? Where's this going? And I would,
Yeah.
when you get your Rick Rubin episode, I'm so curious, because I would guess most like musicians, that's where it starts. Like, oh, it's just this little thing. And then you just kind of start building on it. And that
Yeah.
process, music, poetry, stand-up comedy, film and television, I would guess, I think all of it is somewhat the same. It just comes in as like this little start, and then you just start examining it. And for me, that is so fun. So that's, Intercepts really gives me all of that currently.
Yeah. Well, as someone who, thank you for involving me in Intercepts. It's been so much. It's like I look forward to it so much, because it gets to be. I don't do a lot of voice acting, and being able to do that and be silly, it's so fun. But the thing that stood out to me the most is, one, like the writing and the world building is unbelievable. Like you're so good at that. But the other thing that you're so good at, that I don't know if you're good at because you don't do it to yourself, but you're really good at like directing.
Oh, thanks.
Like at least me, like in a way that is super easy. And I was like, every time I do it, it's a really nice experience, just to like, you're like, oh, let's just do this again, let's try this. Like you have a really nice vision, which obviously is what a good director has, but you're just really good at it. It's maybe because we're friends, but in just a really nice, easy way. And that was what I always took away from recording Intercepts. I was like, he's really good at directing. Like he's a good director, which I don't
Thanks.
know if you've spent time doing that, but it's something that really stuck out to me.
I've really only done it through Intercepts, and I've gotten that feedback a handful of times, which makes me feel like, okay, good. Because like you're talking about when you're doing jokes that you've already recorded and you're kind of not being the most kind to yourself in your head, I hear those
Yeah.
directions when I'm listening back. And so frequently the person nails it on the first take. And then I hear my own voice come in and, yeah, try it this time a little. And I'm like, shut up. They got it. What are you talking about? And so there's definitely like a difference in having a little time away from something. I mean, that goes back to stand up. You're like, this joke is perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you've been doing it every night for months. You take a few
Yeah.
weeks or months away from it, and you come back through different eyes. The words are all
Yeah.
different. You're looser with it.
You're like, I don't believe any of this. I don't believe anything I'm saying anymore.
Yeah, every comedian is the most cocky and worst person to be around in like year 3 or 4, and they're doing well. And you are watching it going, this is terrible. And sometimes those people hit a threshold and they quit, or they get better and they stick with it. And then they look back and they go, I was so bad at that time. And you kind of just go, yeah, I know.
It's
But
so bad.
you're trying. And everyone kind of did some version of that. It's
Yeah.
such a strange thing that now, like, you could start and film yourself and become real famous. And most comedians that have been in it a long time are like, if you had a few more years, you'd get a lot better.
You would get a lot. I mean, yeah, we've had to watch it through very famous comedians recently, where you're just like, they're not there yet, but they're famous, and it's like, that's for better or worse. I'm sure their life is wonderful, but in 10 years, if they still love stand up and they're not just off being famous somewhere, they're going to be like looking back at old reels, just being like, dude, this sucks. It's good stuff. Yeah, it's like reading old. It's like, I mean, man, do you have any? And it's going back to your parents saving artwork. Do you have any artwork from like college or high school still floating around somewhere
Oh,
that you look
definitely.
back on?
Yeah, yeah. My aunt keeps some up on her wall at her house, so when I visit her, I see it. And I got really into. I think the first time I did it, I was like 8. There was this Western Horseman magazine
Yeah,
would take submissions. You could send in art and they would print it. And that felt to me like such a big deal. I felt like I was like a published author. So I would draw these.
that's huge.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
massive. It was so great. And then, so I would draw like a rodeo bull. And each year I'm like, this is my drawing for this year. I'm going to take my time. And it would take me what felt like weeks of just learning how to shade a little better or getting it, and trying to one up some myself or someone I'd seen the year before. The episode would come out, the issue would come out, and then I would see it, and so age whatever drew this from Wyoming, and you'd be like, that's terrible. But then someone else would have something like, that's incredible. And then so I'd always be shooting to like get to that level by that age, kind of a thing.
I love that.
Oh, it was so nice, and it was like very genuine. I never met any of the people, and
Yeah,
it was
it's also like an original, like the OG Instagram feed, but just like on the cadence of like Pony Express level tempo, where you're just like
yeah,
you're like a new thing comes into my feed every month or every year, and you're like, cool, now I got to get better. Now every like third second, I'm like, oh, I got to get better. I got to get better. I got to just
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't really the more polite version of that. And two, I don't think they were really gatekeepers. So I would get my art mailed back to me, and I don't think they would say, "Congratulations, you got in." I would just get the
yeah,
episode and be like, "Hey, they took it. All right, nice." I think sometimes they would send the thing back and be like, "Here's a copy of the page, and here's the episode it's going to be, and here's what it's going to look like. Here's the spread." So
that's
that probably made stand up that much harder because you get so many no's, an inconceivable
yeah,
amount of rejection and no's, and like you
yeah,
just deal with things on a level that most people can't comprehend. Like, I interviewed for this
yeah,
job, I didn't get it. Everyone's been going through that for like the last 5 years. Oh, I've interviewed for so many jobs, my LinkedIn. Like, try
yeah.
getting on stage at LinkedIn every night. See what that feels like.
Yeah, yeah. Who oh man, who is I think Neil Brennan has I think he's the one who came up with it, or I heard him say it. But he goes, imagine having to be in a relationship or know someone in your life that does a presentation every night. Like that's the person you're dealing with. Like pretend you have a presentation at work every single day and then try to operate like a normal human being. And it's like you become crazy
Yeah,
because you're all you're thinking about is the presentation. Like that's all that you're always like slightly somewhere else. And yeah, whether that's stand up or like I've found myself recently with just like when I have a fun idea, I've been painting a lot more, which has been really nice because it's like it's one of the first most recent things in my life that I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want anyone to touch this. Like I don't want to do commissions. I don't want clients. I don't want to sell anything. Like I've been posting them and the feedback's been very nice, which is awesome. And I'm very grateful. But like people are asking to buy them, which is also new for me. And
yeah,
I find myself being like, no, like why would no, absolutely not. Like you don't get to buy it. Like I have this like weird ownership for the first time. And I find myself just all day long, like just with them. Like I'll be, I'll just like with the ideas and like what I want the next one to be. And it's really great until I realize like I'm like just not pushing my daughter on the swing anymore. And she's just like stopped swinging. And I'm just sitting there like daydreaming. And I'm like, oh yeah, be a dad. Like lock in. Like, what are you doing? And so it's been nice to like have a thing to kind of daydream about. But every once in a while, like if you get too many of those going, you cease to become a person in reality.
absolutely. I mean, I get why people every now and again they'll find like a janitor who's passed away and then their entire apartment or like a storage facility is just packed with paintings, and they kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
compartmentalize like, this is what I love, and then I'm just going to make time in my life to do this, and everything else kind of goes away. But a
yeah,
lot of people are trying to juggle 10,000 things, usually at the detriment of sleep or being in the moment, like pushing their child on a swing. And I remember when
Truly.
you were telling me you were getting more into painting, and like I haven't been on social media in quite a while, but when I was like would scroll Instagram, you just got better. Like each one had a new detail. You didn't lean back on, oh, that works, I'm going to do that again. I love that you were like really exploring a different kind of texture or tone or overall setting, or is like, to me it
Yeah.
was, that's the hardest thing to do is, oh, I got really good at, I love this contrast, so I'll just do 50 versions of this contrast, and to shake out of that and be like,
Yeah.
oh, I did one of those, I want to move over here now. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I truly appreciate that so much, because it really is like, it's an effort, because I'm very conscious of it. It is kind of like, I think, a natural progression for me just to be like, oh, that was fun, on to the next thing, to the detriment of having a consistent style that people know and rely on you for. And which is nice for, for graphic design and illustration. I have that, but I do that for a job, and it's a more commercial thing. But yeah, painting now has definitely been more like, cool, that worked, or that didn't work, what's the next thing, that cool, that, whatever. And it's been a really nice, again, with no clients and no commissions and just doing it for myself, it's like, who cares? Like, I don't have to keep anything consistent at all. I can get way worse. I'm gonna get bad. I'm just gonna start.
I haven't done a ton of stand up, and it's been a strange thing for that to be my thing for 20 years, and then just kind of like, I want to be there to push kids on the swing, and I want to be engaged. I also, I think sometimes you're afforded the opportunity to take stock of like, man, I'm just painting because, like, I think in the Basquiat documentary they show him when he first got his big, like, got a gallery show, you need to crank out some work, and he's just riding around on a skateboard like flinging paint at various canvases. You're like, is that the most passionate work ever done? Are you really dialed in there? And I think a lot of careers become that. Like, yeah, give me 5 scooters and just keep them all charged up, and I'm just gonna zoom through this warehouse
Yeah.
flinging paint. And I'd much rather just let me get off this scooter and just work on one
Mm-hmm.
painting. And I think getting in touch with that with yourself is very hard, because you see other people, oh well, they're posting a million times a day, and that seems to be working, and they're booking more stuff, and like keeping all those spinning plates going. I think there's a reason so many comedians have anxiety and a lot of mental health issues, is like, that is a
Yeah.
lot to keep up with. And if the
Yeah.
ends justify those efforts, then great, do it. But when the world changes in a certain way, and you're like, I don't know that that's what I even got into. I don't
Yeah.
I don't
You're
remember
still
being.
on the scooter flinging paint, and you're like, I don't think anyone likes scooters and paint anymore. You're like,
Yeah. So just getting back to that kid version of you, where you're like, I liked drawing this way, or I liked painting. I liked the thing that was new of just having it for myself. And that for me, like with Intercepts, has been that I try to treat it like a guy that goes down to the basement and paints and builds a little model train and then puts it on a track. And over time, like
yeah.
when you go into that person's basement, you're like, what in the world? Like, oh yeah, I built that bridge out of little actual pebbles and I glued it, and the train goes through and it blows real smoke. And you're like, how much time did this take? Even if you don't like trains or models or miniatures, you love
Yeah.
it because someone put a lot of
Yeah.
time into
It took
it.
85 years, and you're like, this is insane. And I like, yeah, just,
One of my favorite things, and I bring this up to my partner all the time. She's not wild about it. We've driven out to it. She refused to go in. Took this gentleman 38 years. It's called the Burrow Schmidt Tunnel. It is either half mile or 2 miles. I can't believe I'm budging that. I'm off my game today as far as details. But he just tunneled through a mountain solo. Just and put a little track in, and you could just take an ore cart back and forth through this tunnel that just pops out on the other side of a mountain for no reason. It didn't facilitate any particular mining endeavor. It just was something that I picture
that's,
him. It's one of the wildest things I think a human has ever done, and it's still there.
yeah, that's
It's
the most like, either I'm going through a divorce, or I just went through a divorce endeavor, or I just love being by myself.
yep.
And I just, just real like Wile E. Coyote, just, I'm out here, nobody bother me. Like, that's, there is
Well,
like a weird part of, I think, like, dudes' brains that are like, that sounds awesome. I'll do that all day.
there is something about finding what you like, doing it, and committing to it, and being able to. Like, what jobs did he have? How did he have the resources to do this? Getting out there on a horse would take hours. Then camping, and I can only get 6 days this time, and I gotta get back to work, but I can get pretty far. And everyone in town, like, we have a podcast, we can talk through our idiosyncrasies. And be like, that is, hey Geoff, I think you gotta stop doing that. Or, hey,
Hey,
good for you,
man.
man, way to paint. I'm glad you're painting. And if that guy's in the saloon and people are like, hey man, are you just about to go get on your horse and go out in the middle of nowhere and dig that tunnel again? No, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah, now it's like, have you heard of betterhelp.com? And it's like, that's what you should be doing. You should be talking to someone about this.
But in the end, I think it's one of the greatest artistic achievements ever. And it's not it's not a sculpture, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
It's saying something philosophically about permanence. I mean, there's a lot to it that I just feel like that person knew something, couldn't vocalize it because it sounded too insane, and then just
Mm-hmm.
quietly did it. And
Yeah,
that to me is like the hardest thing to do.
totally. And people are still to this day interacting with it, and they know about it, and that's so cool.
You go there and all the beams, like the timber, the rafters and stuff that hold it up, they're all signed virtually every square inch by people. Some of them say, hey, to Burrow Schmidt.
Get help.
Some of them are like, thanks for doing this, or hey, or just, but like it, then he somehow lives on as people are like
It's
deleting
great.
their Twitter account, and they're going, but what about, you didn't dig anything, that wasn't yours, you just put some data on
Yeah,
someone else's server, that didn't exist,
man.
that was
Yep.
as ephemeral and temporary, and it just evaporated like it was nothing. And yet this thing is like some level of permanence that art kind of does that. So I think it's an art piece, and I'm endlessly fascinated by it.
Oh, dude, I love that so much. Dude, I love you so much. This is perfect. That's
Well,
the
thanks.
episode.
Great seeing you. Yeah.
You're the greatest, man. Thank you so much for being on. You're the best. You're so wonderful. You're so creative. If there is anywhere people can find you, might be in a tunnel, let them know. And if not, just don't worry about it.
Well, I have accounts on all the social media places. I've abandoned them. I just keep them there so that no one else takes them, like staked my claim. But mainly davidhuntsberger.com. And then
Great.
there's links through there to Intercepts is at a place called the endlessabyss.org, but you can find that through just davidhuntsberger.com. Everything goes from there. But Intercepts is the thing I put the most time and effort into, and that's my little tunnel that I'm digging all the time.
It's perfect. I'm very grateful to have my little Sharpie name quietly written on one of the wooden supports of Intercepts. But awesome, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And yeah,
Thanks, Geoff.
yeah, you're the best, dude.
Well, you're the best.